Hello, and welcome to our Google Workspace community event focused on deploying Gemini for Google Workspace. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community, and I'm thrilled to be here today with several members of the Workspace team who will be taking you through the content and answering your questions today. And before diving in, I just want to remind everyone that questions are encouraged. So please feel free to drop those into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either during the session or at the end. And if we don't get to your question, please add them into the Google Workspace community. And that link is in the YouTube description, along with a few other resources that we'll be covering today. All right. With that, I know we have a lot to get through today. Heather, I will hand it over to you to take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lauren. I really appreciate it. Well, it is fantastic to see everybody here, and I'm really excited to talk about deploying Gemini for Google Workspace today. But before we dive into today's content, I would like to briefly go over an agenda as well as an introduction of myself. So my name is Heather Farley. I'm a customer engineer here at Google Workspace. My technical specialization, of course, falls within the realm of our Google Workspace tools, but also our adjacent cloud productivity offerings. I've been at Google for about 2 years now, but I've been in the productivity industry for coming up on 6 years. So prior to this, I was at Microsoft, where I focused on M365. So I'm really familiar within the productivity space, which is also why I'm incredibly excited to talk about Gemini for Google Workspace. But I digress. That's enough about me. Let's get into the agenda. So today we're going to generally be talking about what is Gemini for Google Workspace to address the elephant in the room. I'm sure some of you have seen that Duet AI is now being called Gemini for Google Workspace. So we're definitely going to get into the nuances of what are the differences between Duet AI and Gemini for Google Workspace. Then I'll take about 30 minutes to go through deployment of Gemini for Google Workspace. So we'll be going through what technical specializations you should be having for your organization as you look to deploy Gemini for Google Workspace, as well as we're going to be going through some labs. Then I'll pass it off to my colleagues to talk about change management, the workspace community and resources. And then, of course, my favorite part, we'll have time for Q&A. Alrighty. Now let's get into deployment. So deployment of Gemini for Google Workspace is going to be pretty straightforward depending on what your tech stack currently entails. The reason that I say what your tech stack currently entails is because, of course, if you have other third-party platforms and however you want to integrate Gemini for Google Workspace into your productivity ecosystem, this is going to look different for every organization. But I guess before we dive into what your organizational hierarchy should look like, what specifications you should be considering for your organization, what we should talk about is licensing. This is the first topic that I always talk to whenever I'm addressing a customer about whether or not they should be deploying Gemini for Google Workspace in their organization and how they can optimize deploying Gemini for Google Workspace in their organization. The first consideration that we should be talking about is what licensing SKU makes the most sense for your organization. Now, Duet for Google Workspace had just one licensing SKU, to put it like that. It was an add-on that you could add on to your existing Google Workspace SKU, regardless if you had the Enterprise Standard or Enterprise Plus Google Workspace SKU. Now, the difference that we're going to see with Duet AI and Google Workspace and Gemini for Google Workspace is, we've listened to feedback from our customers, more options for licensing SKUs, and this allows you to have more flexibility with what you can do for generative AI solutions within Google Workspace. Now, there are going to be differences in Duet as well as Gemini in terms of technically what they offer. Duet AI came with technical capabilities like helping me write, helping me connect, helping me organize, and helping me visualize. These 4 pillars helped users to be more productive in Gmail, Docs, Slides, Sheets, and Meet. Now, in Gemini for Google Workspace, users are going to get these capabilities plus access to gemini.google.com. Actually, because this is going to, or this webinar will include a hands-on component. If you would like, you can visit the consumer version of gemini.google.com now. So again, I'll just repeat that, gemini.google.com. That's going to be the consumer version if you'd like to go ahead and play around with it. And in the enterprise version of Gemini for Google Workspace, which you should be seeing on the right-hand side of the screen, your users will get access to advanced meetings with live translated captions within 15 plus languages, and we're adding more as time goes on. And if we have any IT admins in the room, which I anticipate we probably have a lot of IT admins visiting us here, you'll get the capability to proactively scan your Google Workspace instance for sensitive information using an AI model that is newly introduced to the Google Workspace suite. And it works in conjunction with your existing data loss prevention policies. I could talk for quite some time about this capability. I'm really excited about it. I love having customer conversations in regard to data loss prevention. And that's something that we'll have a conversation about sprinkled in today's content regarding deployment is, of course, security and privacy. How do you set guardrails around your organization to ensure that your privileged resources and your business data aren't going to be exfiltrated? So we'll have a conversation about that, but definitely in the realm of security and privacy, we need to talk about data loss prevention. So if you're interested in proactively scanning what sensitive information already exists in your organization, you can do that using the enterprise version of Gemini for Google Workspace. But I digress. I could talk for quite some time about that. Let's instead talk about the differences between Gemini Business and Gemini Enterprise, so that as you start to think of how you deploy Gemini for Google Workspace to your organization, you can think about how you can audit your organization to see what users could benefit the most from Gemini for Google Workspace. I won't get too much into the weeds about how you can complete this audit and maybe how you can start to roll out a pilot of Gemini for Google Workspace, because my colleagues will be diving into that within the change management portion of this webinar. But just to kind of lay some context and framework for what we'll talk about in regard to deployment, is I always recommend to my customers to audit the folks in your organization, see what users might benefit the most from a productivity tooling like Gemini for Google Workspace to increase their creative output, maybe help them with global remote meetings if they're talking to stakeholders that are in other countries where live translated captions might be useful for them, etc. So how I can start to do that as an admin or as a business stakeholder that we possibly looking to purchase Gemini for Google Workspace is Gemini Business is going to be useful for your users that might benefit from a suite of generative AI features to enhance productivity, of course, boost creativity, as well as save you time. So every user for Gemini Business is going to be subject to a monthly usage limit, which could be beneficial to your organization for a multitude of reasons. And within this usage limit, it's going to be sufficient for typical generative AI needs. So I would recommend this for any of your users that are looking to save some time and get more creative with their work, whereas Gemini Enterprise is going to provide the best of AI for workspace, like what we've mentioned earlier. And it's going to use Gen AI to help customers write, organize, visualize, accelerate workflows, have richer meetings, like with those live translated captions, and more. Both Gemini Business and Gemini Enterprise are going to have access to Ultra 1.0, which is our most capable AI model, coming up soon. Some questions that we might be getting around Google Workspace, Gemini Business or Gemini Enterprise is that if you are an enterprise licensed customer in Google Workspace, you might be wondering, hey, can I purchase Gemini Business? And yes, Google Workspace Enterprise customers can purchase Gemini Business. Both Gemini SKUs do come with enterprise-grade protection around your privileged resources to prevent data exfiltration. And something that we'll get into later is just how we can optimize the deployment of both Gemini Business and Gemini for Enterprise. But I did want to start here because we did have a ton of pre-submitted questions about the differences between Duet AI and Gemini for Google Workspace. And while we're on the topic of deployment, I wanted to address how considering these licensing differences can be the first step in optimal deployment for your organization. Now, as we step away from the licensing implications, let's now get into more of the technical aspects of Gemini for Google Workspace. Data privacy and governance is at the forefront of everybody's mind, especially if you are an IT administrator. This is going to be like the first thing that you're really thinking about when you're deploying Gemini for Google Workspace. And I would just like to start off our conversation here by rest assuring that we do take the privacy and security of your Gemini data very seriously, and we do that in a few ways. Your Gemini for Google Workspace data does receive the exact same data protection and security standards as any other Google Workspace service. This is very publicly available information. If you would like to get more information about it, we have a ton of blog posts as well as white papers detailing what our standards are with data protection and security. And within your own Google Workspace domain, your existing Google Workspace protections that you already have deployed in your organization will automatically apply as you roll out Gemini. So something that I mentioned earlier is there are not a lot of technical hurdles that you have to meet in order to be able to deploy Gemini for Google Workspace. As long as you already have security standards in place to protect your other Google Workspace services, for example, having the correct access and permissions set up for Google Workspace. Do you have data protection rules for your sensitive data? Do you maybe have device policies, or do you have context-aware access policies to ensure that the right folks have access to the right information at the right time? If you have these security settings already rolled out within Google Workspace, they'll automatically be deployed as you roll out Gemini. But that's more along the lines of what your own organization's security standards are and how you can optimize Gemini. But I'd like to bring it back to what Google can do for you and what Google promises in regard to what we offer for Gemini for Google Workspace. First and foremost, we never use customer data to train our AI models. So our models sit outside of your organization's trust boundary, and none of your data is ever going to be fed back into the models. This is a major privacy commitment that I highlight to my customers. Your data is your data. This is how it's been, and this is how it's going to continue to be. And if you have any questions around, well, hey, if you're not using my customer data to train your models, how are you going to be training your models? We actually have trusted tester programs that optimally consent to be able to use their data to train our models. So if you're not consenting for Google to use your data to train our AI models, then we're absolutely not using it. Your data is your data. Now, we also, in regard to the topic of not using your data, if you are ever interested in working together to develop a solution using any of our AI/ML products, by default, our teams will work only with the data that you've provided with us and that has any identifying information removed. So what we do is we work with your raw data only with your consent and where the model development process requires it. Now, the second important point here is that we do not allow your Duet AI data to ever leak outside of your organization. So we take data exfiltration very seriously. And for both the Gemini Business and Gemini Enterprise, and really any of our Gemini products, we provide enterprise-grade controls to our customers to ensure that you do have adequate and sufficient and optimal controls to set those guardrails around your business data. And lastly, you might have some questions around whether or not individual users can social engineer their way into seeing other prompts by other individual users. I would just like to clarify that Gemini does not allow prompts or session content to leak between users. A rule of thumb when I talk to my customers is that your users will not have access to any information that they don't currently have access already to. So being that they don't have access to other session content that your users currently are going to be producing within Google Workspace, rest assured that you're not going to be able to see any social engineering or any prompt content or session content sharing or inadvertent sharing in between users. So Gemini will never allow prompt sharing or session content to leak between your users. Alrighty, let's go ahead. Now that we've addressed data privacy and governance within Gemini for Google Workspace, let's talk about how to assign licenses. We're going to accomplish a few goals here within the short time that we have together. The reason that we're talking about how to assign licenses is because this does require a hands-on lab element. Now, if you don't have access to Gemini for Google Workspace currently, that is okay. You can also go to gemini.google.com to start playing around with some of the hands-on lab prompts that we'll be talking about later. But my best recommendation for how to get the most out of this webinar is to assign licenses either now, if you haven't done so already, or just go ahead and sign into your Google Workspace instance. So we're going to be using Gmail, Sheets, as well as Docs to run through some labs today. And if not, I'll also be having them up on my screen so you can see me running through the labs. But I digress. If you haven't assigned licenses already, what I'd recommend doing is going to admin.google.com if you are a Google Workspace administrator. What you should do here is go to the left-hand panel and drop down directory. From here, you'll be able to select users. Now, if you're just completing these labs to yourself, please go ahead and look up your name and assign yourself a Google Workspace for Gemini license. This might look a little bit different depending on your version of Google Workspace. So just generally know that we're looking to assign a license here if you haven't already. But if you have already assigned a Google Workspace for Gemini license to yourself, then you should be good to go. Now, what I mentioned within the last slide is that we're going to be talking about or rather accomplishing a few different goals here. We're assigning licenses for labs, but what I would also like to generally talk about is when we're deploying Gemini for Google Workspace to your organization, one of the best things that you'd be able to do for your organization is set up an optimal organizational hierarchy. Now, if you already have a Google Workspace domain, I would almost guarantee that you already have an organizational hierarchy set up sufficiently. But the reason that I'd really recommend this is because if you have an optimized organizational hierarchy, what this means is that you also have an optimized access and permissions policy within your organization so that when you do deploy Gemini for Google Workspace, your users will have access to the right information at the right time due to your organizational access policies. If you'd like more information about how to optimize your organizational hierarchy, I would recommend looking at some support articles for Google Workspace in regard to access and permissions. There's a lot of great information in there that unfortunately we don't have the time to get into today, but it's a really interesting conversation that I love to have. And if you're interested in talking more about access and permissions, feel free to reach out. Alrighty. Now, generally, as we're talking about organizational hierarchy, access and permissions and whatnot, what I'd like to point out here is that you don't have to manually or individually assign licenses to your users. If you'd like to deploy this at a mass level to your organization, what you can do with Gemini for Google Workspace is assign licenses to all of your users within a CSV file. We also have capabilities available within APIs if you are interested in something that's a bit more automatic. What we can also do here is assign licenses to all users within an organizational unit. So all you would do is look at the number 2 area on the screen right here, and that's going to show me a drop down of my organizational units. This is also going to be indicative of what my organizational hierarchy looks like if you're interested in exploring that more. But I digress. Let's move forward into the lab component of today. So now that we have hopefully assigned licenses to ourselves or our other users that are going to be working with today's labs, and if we haven't completed that already, feel free to follow along with me today. I will be completing the labs myself. So let's get started. I'm really excited. We're going to meet Liam Taylor. So Liam Taylor is a project coordinator at Symbol. This is one of Australia's leading grocery chains. So Liam Taylor is a go-getter. He's really innovative and he is very successful at his organization. But what he wants to do is bring this to the next level and introduce more meticulous attention to detail. So Liam is going to be located in Sydney, Australia. So you'll notice that most of our examples today will be based in the Australian experience. So look forward to that. But the main thing that we need to know about Liam Taylor is that he is part of Symbol, the organization, and Symbol is going to be launching a fresh choice fruit bar. Liam is going to be the lead coordinator in the launch of Fresh Choice Fruit Bar, so he has to use Google Workspace, Gemini to be able to streamline the launch process, foster seamless collaboration across teams, and of course, lead his organization to a successful launch. Liam has a lot of needs here. Generally, what Symbol aims to do is really improve communication within their organization, ensure that they have effective project management within tight timelines, and also they would really like to ensure that data organization is going to be optimized for this project launch. Something that we see with organizations as well as executives is that they have a lot of data available to them, but this data can sometimes be overwhelming. We need to track this data, we need to analyze this data, and we need to interpret this data in order to make sure that we're utilizing it to its best capabilities. So our needs and challenges are outlined on the left-hand side of the screen. I am going to be leaving this up for just some time here so that we have some time for everybody to read what our needs and challenges are. So just to highlight them at face value, we need to accomplish streamlined communication. We need to ensure that we have adequate and sufficient project planning. We, of course, need engaging visual content. And we need that effective data management, like I mentioned earlier. And the challenges that Liam and Symbol face is that they are confronted with time-consuming documentation. They need to figure out a way to adequately collaborate across teams. They have a lot of stakeholders in their organization, and they need to ensure that they're engaging the right parties at the right time. They, of course, need to create those custom visuals, and they need to ensure that they're working with all of the data that is available to them, and not just working with all the data that's available to them, but optimizing the data that's available to them. All right, so we'll jump into our first lab activity. So the first initial thing that Liam needs to do is draft an initial email to serve as the project announcement. We're going to help Liam with that. So we have about 3 working tasks, 4 in total, that we're going to analyze to be able to help Liam out within his journey of launching Fresh Choice Fruit Bar. Now, the reason that we're running through this lab is not just to see the capabilities of Gemini for Google Workspace, but really what my aim is here is to show everybody what we can do with optimized prompt input. One of the biggest questions that I get from my customers is, how do I optimize my use of a Gemini for Google Workspace, not just as an end user, but also for my entire organization? With rolling anything out to your organization, one of the biggest considerations that you'll have is people management. How are you going to ensure that your people know how to utilize this tool? How do I get the most out of it? A question that we also get a lot is, how am I going to ensure that I'm properly measuring return on investment? And how you can do that is by providing proactive training and resources to your user base to ensure that they know how to optimize these tools. And you'll see a few differences between the lab activities that we're doing today for optimized prompt input. So for this first lab activity, what we'll do is we want to give Liam some prompts for generating a project announcement email. I'll go ahead and get that shared up on the screen. So let's just remember that this prompt here is to compose a detailed and inspiring project announcement, my apologies. And to save time, what I've done is I've copied and pasted these prompts so that I can show them to you within my demo domain. And you'll see that we switched to my demo domain. Right now, I'm within Gmail, and I'm going to select Help Me Write. Now, if you are doing this at home, please note that we're going to be within Gmail, within the section where you can write an email, and then the glowing pencil icon should be available to you to input a prompt. Now, what I'm going to do for Liam is I'm going to input this initial prompt of composing a detailed and inspiring project announcement email for Symbol's new product launch. This is my initial prompt. The reason that I'm honing in on what this initial prompt is because what I input into the tool was actually pretty vague. And this can be great if you aren't necessarily sure of the parameters that you need to compose an adequate project announcement email. Because what Gemini for Google Workspace can do for you is serve as a creative writing tool. So what I can see is with the prompt that I've input, I got a really detailed email that allows me to get a little bit flexible with what sort of announcement that I'm going to be giving to my user base. Now we can see that because I didn't put in enough details, it's not going to be that specific to my use case. This is going to happen if you don't provide the tool with enough information. So what I'll rather do is jump to my second prompt. And my apologies, I'm just going to go ahead and copy my prompt here. If we revisit what the second prompt is, we can see that this is going to be more detailed. Draft an announcement email for the Fresh Choice Fruit Bar launch. We're going to detail objectives, key dates such as the launch on November 20th, departmental roles, and the initial steps required. So let's go back to Help Me Write. We'll put this into Help Me Write, and we'll see what gets spun up here. If you are doing this at home, I hope that you are able to see the differences between the prompts that I'm writing. And you know what? I'll go ahead and expand this. This is going to give me a more specific information about what I'm specifically looking for. It just required a bit more details from myself to be able to get the information that I was looking for within Help Me Write. I like to remember this as an end user for myself because I often can get stuck about what to input into the tool so that I can get the most back from Gemini for Google Workspace. When we are talking about deployment for Gemini for Google Workspace, I think that there's a few components that we need to consider. Of course, there's going to be the technical component of actually making sure that as an IT admin, our organizational hierarchy is constructed correctly. We have the license assignment, maybe automatically or manually applied, whatever makes the most sense for our organization. But aside from the technical aspect of deploying Gemini for Google Workspace, there's also the people component, which I mentioned earlier, of proactively educating your users on how to optimize their use of the tool. And this is going to be one of the key components that I always recommend to customers is be as detailed as possible. Now, the prompt that I input, it may have seemed like a bit of a run-on sentence for how we would normally talk. That was something that I had to get a little bit used to as I was inputting prompts because I would never put that many commas into a prompt for what I was describing, but this is going to greatly help the tool understand exactly what you're looking for. So I can see that I have Fresh Choice Fruit Bar highlighted here. My date of November 20th is going to be listed, and my primary objective is going to be detailed here. Now, for the instance of time, we aren't going to be able to go through absolutely everything of what you can do with Help Me Write, either within docs, sheets, slides, etc. But I would just like to point out that if you are not happy with this creative writing prompt for your email, what you're able to do is select a few different options here to change the tone of your email a bit. You can formalize it, elaborate it, or you can shorten it depending on your preferences. So now that we have helped Liam accomplish a email announcement, what Liam can now do is start to create a project plan. This is intended to be the blueprint for the product launch. This is another great use case that is really common within my customer conversations is how can I create project plans for my organization? How we can help Liam and also yourself do this is we can go into Google Docs and we can generate a project plan for a nationwide product launch. Now, due to time constraints, I'm not going to input both prompts here, but generally, if you are doing this at home, the first prompt that we see is less detail-oriented. And the reason for that is to get you familiar with how details can really improve your experience within Gemini for Google Workspace. But because of time constraints, what I'll go ahead and do is input the detailed project plan prompt. All right, So where we are is we're back in my demo domain. I have the pencil icon here of helping me write. I also have some other smart chips available to me. If you're not familiar with smart chips, these are going to be dynamic content within your Google Workspace instance. This is actually also an AI-fueled feature. And it uses dynamic content that already exists within your organization to help customize your Google Doc content. But I digress. Let's go ahead and input our prompt. And as we're assisting Liam with creating a project plan and a project announcement, what we can see here is that we have a really detailed project plan. So we have the project timeline of October 1st to December 31st, which is what we've detailed within the prompt. And within the project plan, we not only see the tasks and requirements, but we also see the deadlines and who the responsible teams are. So I've noted that I'd wanted the marketing team, sales team, and distribution team involved. And this is a great way to help me get cross-collaborative when I have an organization that has a lot of requirements to, of course, cross-collaborate. Now, what I can see here is I have all of the information that I necessarily would want to be able to help Liam with this launch. And if I wanted to change it a bit, I do have other options here to go ahead and change the tone of my doc, just like we saw within Gmail. And we can see that this is going to be a lot more formalized. We have project chronology here, as well as preparatory, I can pronounce that, measures for the project. We have milestones, accountable teams, different phases, etc. So I'll go ahead and insert this because I am happy with my project plan. So we can see that this took me only a few minutes to create a project plan for a product launch, which greatly helps Liam as he really needs the time to be able to optimize this launch. So now that we've helped Liam create a project plan within Docs, let's go ahead and help Liam create some visuals. Now, we would be able to do this on a demo domain like I just pulled up, but for time constraints, I'll go ahead and show you a picture of what I've completed earlier. If you do complete this at home, I'm very interested to see what inputs and prompts you put in to generate visuals. But what the objective is here is now that we've created a project plan and a project announcement, what we'd really want to do is create unique and visually appealing graphics for a Google slide presentation that Liam needs to create. So Liam, he has two objectives here for this Google slide presentation. Not only does he need a background, so what we've done in prompt 1 when I helped Liam is I input into help me visualize a custom image generation for a background for my slide. So I can see a lot of fruit here. And I would use that maybe as my background or other images to support my presentation. And then my second prompt is a 3D rendering of the Fresh Choice fruit bar packaging. So these are just going to be infographics that are generally going to serve as a placeholder for my product placement if I don't have images already. So this is a great way to get compelling visualizations directly within Google Slides with the Help Me Visualize feature. Now, I would like to note that all of these images are custom. We are not going to be pulling these from the internet. I've gotten a few questions about if that is the case, but no, this is custom image generation with our AI models, and it's going to be entirely custom for what your prompt is. All right, now for our last lab together today, what we'll do is we need to help Liam create a tracking system to monitor the project's progress, because now he's created a Google slide with compelling visuals. He has the announcement email as well as the plan, but he needs a Google Sheet so that he can track inventory, sales, and marketing engagement in real time. So what our tasks are to be able to set up not only a functional tracking table for him, but also a Google Sheet. So I'll go ahead and pull up my demo domain. And right now we're within Google Sheets. So I have helping me organize on the right-hand side. And the first prompt that I'm going to help Liam with is that functional tracking table for monitoring various aspects of just a product launch in general. This is coming up with the same theme that we've had of a more vague prompt as well as a more detailed prompt. And as we are going through these prompts and lab content, what I'm hoping that you're getting from this is how you can optimize Gemini for Google Workspace, as well as some use cases. I think that Liam's story is really helpful for getting innovative with what you can do within your organization. Now, what I can see here is that I have a tracking table for just general aspects of a product launch, and this might be sufficient for Liam for maybe his own personal work. But what I think that we should do for Liam is input that prompt that's a bit more custom for Liam's specific use case. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to input that new prompt. And instead of inserting that functional table, I'll just go ahead and create a new Google Sheet from scratch. Now, what I'd like to point out here is that I've specified that I wanted a Google Sheet for the Fresh Choice fruit bar to track weekly inventory levels in different states, sales figures, and social media engagement metrics. And this is important because what I did within the previous prompt was that I specified just a functional tracking table. This might be applicable to copy and paste into Google Doc, a different visual within my productivity ecosystem, but specifically I wanted a Google Sheet here, which is just going to give me some columns and rows regarding the information that I'm looking for. So I can see that this does specify states as well as cities, what my inventory is, as well as social media engagement and sales. And since I am happy with this, I'll go ahead and insert it, and it's maybe require any other fields to be filled out by Liam. But all right, that was about the extent of what we were going to go through together today for a hands-on lab. If you're interested in any of the prompts, I'm definitely happy to share. So please feel free to reach out and I can provide more information. But just again, I would like to kind of hone in here that the goal of these lab activities was thinking about potential use cases for Gemini for Google Workspace, as well as how you can proactively educate your user base if you do decide to deploy Gemini for Google Workspace. And then last but not least, adequate prompt insertion is going to be really important for how you can get the best return on investment for Gemini for Google Workspace. But all right, I hope you enjoyed our lab series. I'll go ahead and change it over to my colleagues to go over change management.
All right, thanks, Heather. And welcome again, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the Gemini for Workspace webinar. I'm Dan Matos. I have a little bit of a cold, so hopefully you can understand me all right. But Dan Matos here with my teammate Ryan Moppin. We're both Workspace customer success managers. And we're here today to talk a little bit about change management. So why change management? We feel that it's an essential piece. It's an essential practice area in helping enable individuals, teams, organizations realize improvements in productivity, employee satisfaction, overall business value. And Gemini, along with other Gen AI capabilities, are here to support people to do more, not the other way around, right? So with those new capabilities is going to come change in tools, change in processes, workflows. So this is where a solid change management framework is valuable. Again, it's here to help us realize and help you realize improvement in and value from your work. So while we're early in the Gemini journey, the feedback is coming in, and similar to some of the stories that Heather shared, we're finding that the feedback is distilling into 5 key value areas. This isn't meant to be exhaustive, an exhaustive representation of value. It's just context. It's context to help us identify greater value in your own organizations. So here we're seeing that value is being delivered in for individuals and customers, whether it's increased employee retention, increased customer satisfaction, or just new and additional value that's being realized. The question is, how do we sustain the gains? How do we keep the gains of innovation. And this is where we suggest that applying a solid change management framework that incorporates clear plans, it incorporates impactful activities, relevant metrics that measure progress specifically to your business, right? Progress or identify areas of improvement, include active feedback loops so that we're understanding what's happening. How are end users experiencing the product? Are they realizing the gains that they set out to achieve? So this, while we could say we could spend a day, on this, right? But because of time, we're trying to provide a kind of a framework in a nutshell type of a view. So we could talk about and unpack the why and the how and the what of change management, but hopefully this will help you, this visual will help you to think about your approach to change management. What are you doing today? What do you need to start doing today to kind of build out that practice? Hopefully this will also leave you some guidance and resources on how you can drive, that effective change in your organization or within your teams. What we're looking at here are the common phases of change, typical or common in various methodologies, change management methodologies within the industry. Those are across the top. And along the left margin is where you'll see the key functions, right? Core functions, again, not meant to be a recipe for change, rather a guide that can be modified based on your organization's makeup, your chemistry, what needs your organization or team need, what needs your people and organizations have. So highlighted are a couple areas today that we just wanted to double click on briefly. Along in the prepare phase of change, we highlighted here sponsors. The number one reason that change initiatives fail is because there isn't strong, solid, engaged sponsorship, executive sponsorship. They need, our sponsors need to be visible. They need to be invested. They need to be active, understanding the why, reiterating that why, helping, the teams and the end users realize that there's a value-based purpose in this tool and in this initiative. So how do we support them? We support them with messaging, right? The why, the when, the how, reinforcing, building the awareness, building the desire to kind of use and incorporate these new capabilities that we have. We additionally support them by clearly stating what we need them to do. Do we need greater advocacy? Do we need help removing blockers? Do we need help building coalitions? All of this will start to build the momentum that we need for the change to continue and to achieve the outcomes that we set out to achieve. Early adopters is a key group. This is your group of enthusiasts, right? Those that like playing with the tech. They're curious, they're open to learning and sharing. Oftentimes this group will naturally transition into being part of your Google Guides or your Google Champions group. Those folks kind of help keep the change as well after the initiative is completed. And supporting this group could be as easy as giving them early access, opportunities to speak and train or share what they've learned, badges or other forms of recognition. Be creative, do what you think best resonates with your folks and your people, but don't overlook this group because they can really make a significant impact in driving effective change. If we look over a little bit to the right, training is not synonymous with change management. Many times folks think, oh, change management, send them to training. Training is key, but it's not to be confused with the totality of change. Some of the less positive feedback that we're getting, and Heather touched on this a little bit earlier today, some of the less positive feedback is related to folks not knowing how to interact with Gemini. Heather went through some prompts, right? Effective prompts, less effective prompts. The product can be amazing, solutions can be amazing, but if we don't know how to interact and have it relate to our mission, our role, our objectives, a lot of times it's easy for us to just pass a premature judgment or conclude that the solution doesn't meet the need. So keep in mind, Gemini is an evergreen product, right? It's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. So we also need to continue to have a culture of continual learning as well. We also want to make sure that we take time to measure, define and measure success, right? So with something new, by nature, oftentimes we can stand back a bit and just check it out or kick the tires, right? A new phone comes out, we handle it, we swipe it, we tap on it, but we don't use it for a specific function, right? We don't use it on first pickup to make a banking transaction or finish a language course. And likewise with Gemini, there's the temptation to, hey, we want to kick the tires. We just want to just check it out. And this is good, but we also encourage you to think with the end in mind, right? Take the time up front to define what success looks like. What are we out to achieve? What are some specific use cases within the business that you're trying to solve for? Whether they're quantitative, whether they're qualitative, or other, measuring success is critical. It demonstrates the value, right? It helps others realize their own value as they're using the product. And it just reminds everyone of the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we investing our time, our resources, and our energy to incorporate these capabilities into our business? And sometimes defining that is hard, right? Where do we start? Where do we start with defining success or measuring it? And that can be daunting, but it's not impossible. So, just put in the effort up front and the change management, and incorporating that into the change management process, and the benefits will show. So hopefully, again, folks, time is short, and we want to leave some time for questions. But hopefully, this peek into our change management framework, how we prepare and manage and try to sustain change, some of the key functions that we see and try to incorporate is helpful, right? Hopefully, this is something that will frame thinking, provide guidance, some resources that we're going to share a little bit afterwards. And if it's something that we want to double click into because it's we want more time to spend on this, let us know, provide that in your feedback, and maybe that's something that we could address in a follow-up session. This last slide, we've touched on some best practices. We've touched on a couple of these. We've distilled this out of our own experience, and it's been corroborated oftentimes by our customer feedback. But one thing that I would just call out specifically is Skills Boost. If you haven't spent time on our Skills Boost learning platform, please do check it out. Take those courses. We're regularly trying to add new content to the platform and keep that content fresh. So leverage that and bake that into your practices as well for around Gemini. Office hours, we're hearing a lot of good feedback from as well. It's just a great informal, casual setting for folks to ask questions, get questions answered, share experiences, even work through a couple scenarios, right? Scenarios or questions, sample use cases. It's just, if you haven't yet, consider incorporating office hours. And then lastly, just stay in the know, right? Keep the feedback system, the feedback loop going, right? Keep a pulse on end users, what's working well, what isn't working well. Keep the surveys going, share that with yourselves, share that with Google as well. All those things can really influence the direction of the product, enhancements and features. It's that feedback is core. So, we hear that, it takes a village, right? So in this sense, it takes a community to kind of continue and succeed in that Gemini journey. So I'll hand it over to my teammate, Ryan, who will talk to us a little bit more about the Workspace community and some of the resources that are available to each of you. Ryan?
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So I just wanted to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, our Workspace community. So hopefully folks that are on this call have engaged with our community. That's really where I would encourage people to ask questions, look for resources, look for updates. So if you're not involved in the Workspace community, think about joining today, because a lot of these resources that I'm mentioning here are also posted out there, and we'll continue to add more and more as the technology continues to evolve and we continue to create more resources to help you and your organizations embrace generative AI via Gemini for Workspace. We have blog posts that have best practices and tips. We have a lot of exciting events upcoming over the next 30 days. So I would encourage you to sign up for those to learn more about what's coming within Gemini for Workspace, how to do effective prompting. We're actually going to do a session specifically on prompting that I know everyone in this call now will get benefit from. There's also new feature launches. So I saw a lot of questions in the chat around, when is this feature coming? What features are coming for Gemini for Workspace? This is a great place to go for that. And then you can just ask general questions. Dan had mentioned, in speaking of change management training, so there is 6 modules out there today under Skills Boost. This is free to anyone. So I would encourage you and your organizations to take advantage of this. You'll continually see new training coming out throughout the year. So keep an eye on the training and make sure you're socializing that with you and your teams. The Help Center is a great area as well. So there's great links here that I've listed that help you get started with Gemini. So some things we've talked about, these are documented out there. A Gemini for Workspace cheat sheet. So across each of the products, how to leverage Gemini. So even taking some of what you learned from Heather and getting some more details there. Tips for writing prompts. We talked about kind of garbage in, garbage out, or the expectation that the tool is going to understand exactly what you want. That isn't the case. So really being mindful and thinking through what are you trying to get out of Gen AI when you're asking it a prompt, and being very diligent with the details you want and need will make you more successful and the outcomes coming out of it. And then there's the Gen AI Workspace Handbook. This is a great, I think it's like 25 pages, but it goes into very detailed analysis on where we're seeing impact across lines of business with organizations. It can get you thinking about where can I get value out of Gemini for Workspace. So we really encourage folks to take a look at that, and has a lot of great resources there. And then I saw a ton of feedback in the chat during this webinar. And so, if you have feedback on the product, give that to us. So once you receive a output of a prompt, you have the opportunity to, give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you don't like it, and, I think someone mentioned something about bullet points not looking correct. Hey, let us know. Give that further screenshot and detail within our interface, so our product team can take that and make those enhancements. It's a very fast-moving technology, and our team is constantly looking for feedback. So I'd encourage you, as you're leveraging this technology, continuously give us feedback. So with that's it for me. I think the one big thing, if you're not already out on our community, please join us today and continue the questions. We love to help and answer. So continue to engage with us in the community going forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Ryan and Dan, for this session. I know we have about 7 minutes left to cover just a few final resources and questions. So thank you all for your questions. We've been trying to tackle them as best as we could in the chat, but we will do our best to get through the remaining questions here. And we are seeing a few questions around resources that we were just talking about. Where can I access this? The community. Check out the YouTube description below, and you should be able to access those there. In particular, that first resource on tips and resources to maximize your productivity. That one links out to several other getting started support resources, help documentation on all things Gemini for Google Workspace. So do check that out. Cool. And then, as Ryan mentioned, we do have a lot of upcoming events, including these two on February 29th and March 6th. I do want to highlight that March 6th one on effective prompting. That'll be a great session. So we would love to see you at that one. And then we would also love to hear your feedback. So as we said, if it's around the product, the solutions, or the sessions and how we're communicating with you, we'd love to hear your feedback. So that third link right there should just take you about a minute to hear from you on that. Okay, let's dive into the questions. So our first question, because we did receive some in advance, is how does Gemini handle data security and privacy, especially when integrated with Google Workspace? And I know we touched on data and privacy a little bit earlier in the session, but wanted to open this up for the team.
Yeah, no, for sure. Great question. And I think that we generally tackled the majority of the question earlier in the presentation, but just really hone in on how Gemini handles data security and privacy within Google Workspace. Is that if you are an enterprise customer, rest assured your information is never going to be utilized to train our AI models within Google. So if you're concerned about your data integrity, I would just like to confirm that your data is your data. It is not going to ever be used outside of your organizational boundary to train Google's models. And all of the data and security configurations that you already have existing within Google Workspace. For example, if you're an enterprise standard or enterprise plus customer and you have data loss prevention rules, those will be automatically applied to your Gemini for Google Workspace feature configurations across your domain. So everything that you already have configured in terms of security and data protection in your organization will be applicable to Gemini for Google Workspace as well.
Great. Okay, our next question is it possible to enable Gemini to a small portion of my users first?
I can take that, or we can have, this might be like a bit of a change management question as well, but yes, so you would be able to enable Gemini for Google Workspace to a small portion of your users first. We would typically recommend this for customers that are interested in deploying a pilot test of Gemini for Google Workspace for your organization. And all this would necessarily entail is if you purchase Gemini for Google Workspace licenses, just assign a subset of those licenses to your pilot group.
Great. Sounds good. Okay. Now we will transition over to a few of our pre-submitted questions. So regarding reporting usage adoption, any changes we can expect or that you can share, such as new events in Drive audit logs, etc.?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, and I'm really excited to see the changes that we'll be releasing for the audit logging experience for Gemini for Google Workspace. But at this time, admins do not have access to any Gemini for Workspace reports. We are evaluating types of usage reports that could be useful to admins. So again, to kind of hone in that message of please give us feedback, that would be incredibly helpful for our team to be able to develop the product. As we've mentioned, this is an incredibly fast-moving product. So if you have any feedback on what log events you'd like to see within the admin console, please submit.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you. And been seeing some other suggestions or specific features that you're calling out as we were going through the labs. So please continue to share your feedback, and it's really helpful for us. Okay. So one question is there a way to create a profile where we can give more information about our business so the program can better understand and respond to the information you're putting in for your ask?
Yeah, so this I think would require a bit more detail than I'm able to give within the time that we have available. But something that's really unique about Gemini for Google Workspace is that because it exists within your organizational boundary, it is able to work with your personal organizational data so that it is going to have access to information about your business so that your prompts and really any information that you're utilizing with Gemini for Google Workspace, including gemini.google.com, is going to be specifically tailored to your business, depending on what information you give it accessibility to. That's a great question, though, and it would require a bit more details for me to properly give you information about how you can optimally configure that. But generally, high-level answer is yes, it's going to be able to be customly configured for your organization.
Makes sense. And with that in mind too, if there are any questions that we're not able to get to today, please use the Google Workspace community, and that link is in the YouTube description. So if there's any follow-up questions, our team would be happy to follow up with you in those forums, because I know we just have a limited amount of time today. All right, so I think we'll do the last question right now. Another one here is, can there be recurring surveys that ask different questions to better understand your business or company?
So I'm not necessarily sure about recurring surveys, but what I can attest to is that we are really big on feedback. So this is probably something that we will be seeing with Gemini for Google Workspace, because we are looking to better understand our customers and their use cases with how they want to supply their Gemini for Google Workspace like data with their personal business information. So I can't necessarily say anything about surveys in particular, but I do know that we have a robust feedback system.
Great. Okay. Well, I know we covered a lot today and we had a lot of questions coming in, but I think we did our best to tackle as many as we could. Again, if there are any that we weren't able to get to today, then please use the Google Workspace community and we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you so much to the team. We'd love to see you at one of our future sessions and we'd love to hear your feedback. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in the world. Thanks again, Heather.